Hi friends, welcome back to the Data Science Hangout. If this is your first time joining, it's so nice to meet you. I'm Rachel. If you want to say hi in the chat, please do. The Data Science Hangout is an open space for the whole data science community to connect and chat about data science leadership, questions you're facing, and what's going on in the world of data science. I like to remind everyone the sessions are recorded and shared to the RStudio YouTube and our Data Science Hangout site. So you can always go back and rewatch or find sessions that you missed too. We also have a LinkedIn group for the Hangout. If this also helps you find people and connect with each other or continue discussions, I'll share that in the chat in just a second here. But together, we're all dedicated to making this a welcoming space for everybody. And we love when everyone can participate and we can hear from everybody. So no matter your level of experience or area of work, there's always 3 ways you can ask questions. You could jump in here by raising your hand on Zoom. You can put questions into the Zoom chat, and feel free to just put a little star there if you want me to read it out loud instead, or else I could just call on you to introduce yourself and add some context. We also have a Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously, and we'll share that in the chat in just a second here too. I just started adding this in because I always frame this as questions, but if you have something to add to a specific topic, like your own perspective to share on something, we'd love to hear that too. And also wanted to mention that if you are currently hiring, we love to be able to have people share those open roles in the chat as well. So feel free to use those that chat to share links. We don't see that as spammy if you want to share open positions there. But with all that, I'm so excited to be joined by my co-host for today, Melissa Perry, Senior Manager eCommerce Analytics at Peloton. And Melissa, I know you've been here in the audience quite a few times, so great to have you here as our leader for today. We'd love to have you introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about your role and the work that you do, maybe also something you do in your free time as well.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you for having me. I always enjoy coming into this community and hearing from the other leaders and practitioners in this space. So I'm really pleased to be here today. I've been in business intelligence and data science for the majority of the last 10 years in my career. I love helping leaders make decisions. It's part of what I do, just taking a really complex environment, and I feel it's part of my purpose to help people understand the truth, and most recently help people understand what's coming and what I recommend they should do because of what's coming. So that's where I really find my passion. I've worked in many industries. I started off my career in Toyota and purchasing and being in a very quality-driven manufacturing, lean environment. And then I've also worked in public education. I've worked in telecommunications, and I would say that my role in telecommunications as an analytics engineer, that's where I really kind of kicked off my obsession with moving into data science and learning how to automate decisions. And there was just data everywhere in my role at US Cellular Corporation. I also became an R user there, heavy R user. And with that, that exposure, I decided to level up my skills and pursue a master's in data science while I was an analytics engineer there. I went to the University of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, Eau Claire, and just recently completed that. And I'm obsessed with this problem of predictive maintenance. It's one of my passion areas. How do you help an organization predict when something will fail and thus do all of the activities upstream to prepare for that event? I just love it. But my most recent role, as you said, has been coming onto the team at Peloton. I joined at the height of the pandemic in February 2021, and I adopted a little pod of people called the eCommerce Analytics pod on our data science team. And we built a dream team. Some of them are on the call today. just great colleagues and friends, and just really smart people that are passionate about helping our stakeholders to make decisions around, gosh, you name it, extended warranty. Diana's talking right now. She has a model called serial number event stream, where she helps predict when our bikes will fail and helps our supply chain team prepare for that. And gosh, I just can't say enough good things. Our referral program, our member support agency, how can we help those folks to provide our members with a better post-purchase experience once they buy one of our connected fitness units? This has been an incredible journey for me, because I stepped into formal people leadership when I came onto Peloton. And not only did I take on a team and get to work with all these great people, but it's no secret that it's been a lesson in change management for me. Heavy change management, every 3 to 4 months, change management. So I'm passionate about sharing with you about that journey, and happy to answer any questions you might have about what that's been like doing analytics in that kind of environment, and building out my team. So that's me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to ask you more about that too. One part of the first question, what's something fun that you like to do in your free time outside of work too?
Oh, cooking. Definitely cooking. I am all about the kitchen. I like using cookbooks. I really like to be methodical and get everything ready to go so that I can enjoy myself while I cook and kind of listen to music and things. But I work remotely, and that's something that I do in the evening that I just love the ability to do that.
I love it. I noticed that a lot of people say cooking on here. Maybe there's some relationship between data science and cooking for sure. But I know, thank you for sharing how you've been building the dream team. And I would love to learn a little bit more while we're waiting for questions to come in about how you approach growing and developing your team.
Yeah, absolutely. So I inherited some team members who were already here. There were 2 when I came into the e-commerce analytics space, and then I grew people. I like a diversity in thought when I approached building an analytics team. So we took folks with direct domain experience in the member support agency who are interfacing with customers. Because I was trying to improve that e-commerce experience, we thought, well, let's get some folks that know it best. They've come from the front lines, but they also want to grow their career in data science. So I've grown people from that level. And then I also grow people who are kind of mid-level in their data analysis career and kind of get them to the next step. So how do you, and the most common pain point is like, and I got here in my career where it's like you spend all this time building dashboards or building a presentation, and then you're like, okay, what next? What are you going to do with that? And so I like to throw people over that loop and get them thinking about, how do I deliver insights? How do I deliver recommendations? Kind of like my favorite part of it. But I start, pretty nascent. At Peloton, we have in our central data science team, we're kind of like a central, a center of excellence model. And so we sit right alongside our data engineering team, and there's quite a bit of dev work that is expected from our data analysts all the way up to our data engineers and data scientists that might not be expected on all the other teams like that I'd work for. So I start real simple with folks. I pull up the terminal, and we start with, Linux commands and things like that, and get and build from there. And then we start with Git. You've got to have some development skill on our team. And so we practice what that means and kind of help them understand that I'm about to throw you for a loop here. We're about to do some things that are uncomfortable, but it's okay. You're supported. And you're going to be fine. And then beyond that, we start exposing our team members to requests that come in that could be helpful to folks, like reporting. So there's always a need at Peloton to help people across the company understand what's going on. How many people are eligible for this promotion or this particular refund event because of where they are in their post-sale process. So there's always opportunities like that where you can really get a team member's hands dirty early on, and they can understand the data warehouse, the mart, use BI tools. We use Looker and Tableau here at Peloton. So how can you create that report? And then after someone demonstrates their ability there, I start to put them in front of stakeholders more so, and start to build that consult up. And the consult for me is really based in ensuring they can do design thinking and build empathy with that stakeholder and start to recommend, here's what you're asking me for, which typically stops at reporting, right? But here's what I think you need to be asking me.
Can you expand a bit on design thinking and what that means for your team?
Yeah. So design thinking is an approach to really getting to know people and their pain points as you're trying to help them. So on my team, we have really like 4 to 5 strong stakeholder groups where, you know, I have not a dotted line, but a real strong relationship with a leader at Peloton. So let's say it's our extended warranty program. I get to know what's bothering that leader data wise. Like what are you on the hook for? What are you struggling to measure? How much are you doing? How well are you doing it? Like, what is your goal? And I try to help my team to build the same level of consult and empathy with their counterparts on that leader's team so that they can really provide helpful solutions with data. And that's been strong, and it helps them think about how do they design their approach? Like, what is this model that we're going to build really be able to do? What are the actions that this person is struggling to do? And how can I use data to help with that? So it's really kind of like a brainstorming activity, but you're putting yourself in the shoes of that stakeholder, getting to know them, figuring out how you can be most helpful.
I love that explanation. Thank you. That's so helpful. I see there's a lot of questions starting to come in now. And one that came in on Slido was, do you share any best practices or lessons learned from the e-commerce analytics team? Like, do you have a blog, for example?
What we do. We have a couple things that we do at Peloton that have really helped us to communicate about our successes. And we're going to be expanding upon these, but we have a newsletter that we work with our central project management team, and we share our wins. We also share some things that we're struggling with that we call like dirty laundry. It is just, you know, it's a startup, so nothing's perfect at Peloton. But we share how we're working through some of those issues. And then my favorite thing that we do is we have what we call a data town hall. And because we're that central analytics team, sometimes it can be hard to have that sense of community with all the other analytics teams that are at Peloton helping make decisions. So we stood up this data town hall event, and we had presenters from the e-commerce analytics space that talked about some of our most exciting models. Like Diana Morrell, who's on the call, spoke about her serial number event stream model and all the use cases that have come from that, and kind of showcase this design thinking element and how she thinks like a data scientist. Those kinds of opportunities are really powerful. And in that same data town hall, we also talked about tech stack. We talked about programming approaches to ensure that our data models are well taken care of and documented for others, and made sure that people knew how our data engineering stack was evolving. So those are not only in the e-commerce analytics space, but a place where, yes, we share that. Now, if you're asking me externally if we post, we do not at this time, but I'm always encouraging my team to blog and share their great work.
That's awesome. I really like the idea of the data like town hall event. How often does the team do those?
You know, it's a quarterly thing at this time. we're a distributed team, and resources are tight, and especially right now with the state of the economy. But right now we plan to do that quarterly.
Cool. I see, Millie, you put a question into the chat just a little bit ago. Do you want to ask that live on the call?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, Melissa. Yeah, so I'm like newer to the e-commerce space. I'm coming from higher education, and I'm now currently working as a senior data analyst at Thinks. And I was just like wondering if you, since you also recently like completed a degree, if you have any like recommended like e-commerce specific resources or communities that you like to reach out to, so I can like I guess catch up on the metrics and lingo in the analytics world in e-commerce.
That's a really good question, Millie. Hi, welcome to the group. And congratulations to you on taking this step in your career and trying something new. That's just so admirable. And yeah, I'm familiar with Thinks as well. Very cool company. Yeah, I am not, I think there's a few particular areas where you might go out and find some critical KPIs for e-commerce. I would just research that like I would anything else, like Googling it. But what I can say is that like at Peloton and in my team specifically, although my title is e-commerce analytics, I don't and my team never analyzed the kinds of metrics that you would think we would. So it's always been kind of this misnomer. Like for e-commerce analytics, Millie, one of the key metrics, but this is really like for an engineering based team. So it depends, like if your team is engineering based and trying to constantly improve the engineering of your page, or if it's like more business facing and you're just trying to do things like report and help people understand the transactions, like the sales transactions. So my team kind of played on that latter role where we're helping executives understand the state of sales and post-sale activity for the members. But like conversion rate, that's one of the key metrics in e-commerce, like in the broader community. That's really an engineering facing metric at Peloton, because all of the changes that those engineers make, they want to see, okay, am I driving conversion? Am I getting more sales through making this particular change on the website? So that's one that I would definitely start to familiarize yourself with. And you may end up finding a community and sharing with me some of that information, Millie. Wish I could be more helpful to you.
Oh, all good. Thank you.
I was just writing into the chat too. I would love to try and gather some more retail examples that we've seen too. And I'm thinking about the Hangout a few weeks back with Jay from Harry Rosen as well. That might be a helpful one to check out. I see a few other Slido questions coming in too. And one is, what are some of the biggest challenges of working with non-technical stakeholders?
Yes. So one of the challenges first is communication and figuring out how to resonate with a non-technical stakeholder when your team and those that are working with you are primarily technical. You have that challenge of building trust. Trust is the first, that's the biggest thing, right? They have to have an awareness and a belief that you're doing everything you can to provide that data product that's going to help them do better. And so I do think it does go back to that design thinking, that empathy, and the having enough humility to ask people, how can I really help you be better? And not having that belief as an analyst that you know all the answers, because let me tell you, you do not. Numbers and data are only modeling what we have them model, that they're a representation of the truth, but on the ground, operationally, there's always so much to learn. And you've got to really build those relationships with the folks that are on the ground that you're trying to help, so they know you care. So they just know you care. And I think once you get over that hurdle and they know that you're trying to help them be a better version of themselves and do better at work, then you've got that inroads to start passing them. Okay, here's this report that you were asking for. How can we make this better? Or, hey, I see you're really struggling with this. Did you know that this is the journey that you're on and you've made this much improvement? Or, you know what? It looks like we're getting worse in this area. I'm seeing a negative trend here. So it's really trust first, then communication, and figuring out to what extent do you need to read into that person's technical capability and dial back all the things that because, and this is the hardest thing for me to tell my people, it's I care about your technical know-how and your technical progression, but your stakeholder oftentimes does not, especially if they are a non-technical person. It just overwhelms them. And if you're talking about programs that you're using or the statistical elements, and you're not being careful about how you're positioning that, it can become very unapproachable very quickly. So it's definitely it's a soft skill and an area that must be developed in order to truly get use cases into production.
Great, thank you. I see that Thamalu, and apologies if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, asked a question into the chat, and I'm not sure if you're still on, so I'm going to ask it live, but feel free to jump in and add context too. But the question was, how do you identify data loss due to system issues? They said that's part of my job I find very stressful.
Okay. So data loss due to systems issues. It's so funny because we had a situation like this come up yesterday. So I think with that, now I will say this is not what I do in my everyday today role, but I've done this role before earlier on. And I think it's a matter of laying out and understanding the architecture first of the systems that are supposed to talk to one another. So when you understand the process flow and the lineage of the data as it moves through, let's say from your customer. So let's say your customer enters in their name on your website, and then you go and you are assessing the next system that is integrated with that and supposed to receive that, and perhaps the name didn't flow over. Well, to what extent is that happening? Because in complex systems, sometimes it's going to come over and sometimes it isn't. And so I think in many cases, it's a means of pulling data out of both of those systems that are allegedly supposed to talk to each other in some way, and then seeing what went and what didn't. A lot of times that there could be an integration issue there, or there could be a separate business process that's flowing and then it's not writing. So I think it's really a matter of taking a step back, understanding the flows that you have assigned on your data collection process to really assess where is that data expected to go, and then where should I be seeing a one-for-one match. We got to make sure we know that part first before we say it's lost.
All right, thank you. Deepsha, I see you asked actually two great questions into the chat. Do you want to jump in and ask those?
Sure. And I think one of the questions you almost have answered it already, but you talked about having so many projects. How do you prioritize between them? And the second question is, what proportion of these projects are stakeholder driven versus you think, oh, we know the product, so we think this would be a good idea, and then reaching out to your stakeholders thinking you have a project idea. Which one of these usually tend to get more traction?
Yeah, this is such a great question. Thank you so much for asking it. And you're catching me at a place in a space at Peloton where I am reassessing everything that my team does. So we're going through times of radical change, and that is something that every leader is going to face. Like, what should we be doing? I will tell you the truth and be super transparent with you. Our data science team has been really in alignment with various stakeholder teams, almost 30 teams across the company. So we've played that role, cross-functional role, and almost like a service provider role for as long as I've been here. And, we've really jumped in and filled in holes where, as a startup, Peloton was coming up and there was no infrastructure or no data collection or no one to really provide the service to the company. And we raised our hand. And we have lots of models that kind of reflect our best effort to make these decisions. And that has been my top priority so far. When I came in, it was taking in use cases like extended warranty and cleaning that up. And it was very clear, like, that's your top priority. But, as we kind of take a step back and really think about how we can add value to Peloton, sometimes those things get deprioritized. And you start to think about, no, what does the cross-functional data science team really need to do? How do we really tell our C-suite what's going on and what they should do? And just like, it's really exciting and a turnaround. And I think what has happened because of the turnaround situation is we've seen a new group of leaders that use data holistically in ways that our leadership team before didn't. And so as you see them using these new data points, you start to get inspired about, like, well, if they knew this, then they could do X, right? If you knew what the lifetime value of each customer from each channel of sales was, then you could figure out where to invest in more. And maybe that's the right role for the cross-functional data team that doesn't really have a dog in any operational fight to be playing. And I think that that's where at least I'll be speaking to my new leadership about changing the priority. But that's what has happened so far. Does that help you?
That does make sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love hearing how excited you get talking about, like, the business making decisions with data too.
Mm-hmm.
I see someone asked anonymously on Slido, what advice would you give to someone who wants to transition from an individual contributor role to a manager role in data science?
Yes. So I have been here. I think when you're ready and you want to try it, you should raise your hand and express yourself. That's the first piece of advice. You need to tell your leader. You need to tell your mentor. Hopefully you have a mentor that's another piece of advice, is to get a mentor that might be doing that work that you want to do, and start to talk to them. Hey, how'd you get here? What did you do? So that you have that different advice coming in from different perspectives, and you're checking yourself, because that's a big hurdle. That is such a big hurdle to clear, moving from that IC role to a manager. It's a very vulnerable state. So get someone else who's in your corner who can help you on that process. But yeah, raise your hand and get a mentor who's already doing it. And then the third piece of advice is to brace yourself for like a year and a half of constant change and wrestling with your own brain, because it's really difficult to take your hands off the keyboard. And so I would say to give yourself some grace in doing that. Nobody gets it right in that transition period. Like, there's always going to be stumbling points where you're going to make a mistake, or you're going to step on somebody's toes, or you're going to make one of your ICs feel like you're micromanaging, and you're really not. You're just trying to make sure it goes well, but give yourself some grace and use that mentor to help you navigate those issues.
I really like what Libby just added into the chat as well on this topic too. I don't know if Libby, you want to jump in with that?
Sure. I don't know if anybody else has this experience, but being maybe specifically a woman, being a kid who's like meek and always told to like be quiet and not be a bother to anybody, it was a huge lesson for me as I moved through my life that I actually had to verbalize and ask for what I wanted. No one was going to just hand it to me because I deserved it. I had to say, hey, I want to do this. Can I do this? And that leaves you very vulnerable and open to somebody saying no, or saying that they don't think you're ready or whatever it is. But you can sit around and spin your wheels forever if you don't at least ask or put it out into the universe that you want it in some way.
Libby, I want to respond to that and just relate back to the room, because when I first raised my hand, I heard no. And I had that mentor who was in my ear saying, but you're ready. And Peloton said yes. And so did other companies too. So just because you hear that no doesn't mean that the universe doesn't want you to do that. I love the way you said that, Libby. And it's so important for everyone to hear. So the person who asked that, go for it. Go for it and try it.
Definitely. Thank you all. And I see somebody else asked an anonymous question that was, do you have any tips for leading a team whose primary language is not yours? So for example, I'm taking a role and the team uses SAS and Python, whereas my background is R.
That's a really interesting thought. Well, I guess primarily, I would, if I were put in that situation, I would truly take the strategic approach and try to start by asking that team, like, what is it that you're working on? What is the value and the output that you're delivering? And like, what do you think we should fix to make it better? And kind of see where it is that they want to kick up and like what would give them more energy, and see how you can play a small part. So maybe you have to spend a little bit of time learning like enough to be dangerous in the tool that they use. And that's really just so you can review their code and, you know, assess like, hey, is this done correctly given the business requirements? It's so easy to kind of, when you're programming, make a different assumption or generate an output that is not what you intend. The other thing I would recommend is to just try to put on that hat of like tool agnosticism, where you start to learn multiple of these programming languages and get comfortable with the fact that you don't know any of them. And oh, by the way, no one else knows all of them in their head. That's the secret. Everyone else is Googling at work every day. And so even if you're struggling to review that code, be comfortable going, hey, I don't know this. Like, let me Google what they did here and read some of those docs and see, like, does that make sense? Okay. And you'll get your confidence about you, like, as you start to do that more. But I would say don't shy away from what they're doing, even if it's in a different language. Like, try a little bit and see, like, first assess, like, what's the area that they really need your help in? They probably don't need you sitting there coding by them. They probably need you to address something bigger. But you can always review their code and get your feet under you, even if you don't know the language.
Thank you. And I see, Brian, I think this was in relation to this question as well, but you shared some thoughts in the chat too, if you want to jump in. And I think it was, oh, there you are, you're unmuted. There's two Brians here. I'm not sure which Brian.
So me?
Somebody said, so trust your people and your job to make.
Yep, that was me.
Yeah.
That was the big transition from individual contributor to leadership is all about that. Your job is to make sure your people have the tools and time to do the job, and that's it. And you have to figure that out. Like, it's not about having check-ins with them every week or all this other stuff. And it's really about you are now the interface between them and leadership. And if it goes well, that's great. And you give your team credit. If it doesn't go well, it's on you. It's not on your team. It's on you as a leader. So that's where that's why I see rookie leaders run into trouble. First sign of problem, they'll pass the buck. You can't do that. And as soon as you do that, your people will not trust you, and you will become a terrible leader. You just, they'll hang you out to dry without you even knowing it, and they even know it because they realize they don't trust you. And so as a leader, you have to have that in you. You're the buffer.
Absolutely. I love that, Brian. I'm going through to the chat to see if there were questions I missed over here, but I know there are a few others coming through on Slido too. But just want to remind people, if you joined a little bit later, that we have the Slido where you can ask questions anonymously, and Tyler can share that link again. But also just feel free to raise your hand here on Zoom to jump in too. But one of the other questions, Melissa, was, can you tell us more about the development of your team in parallel to the tech stack?
Yeah, so the tech stack we have at Peloton here is we use SQL, use AWS Redshift for most of our data manipulation work. We use Looker as a BI front end tool, as well as Tableau for some of our reporting work that gets done. And then as we go further, then just the BI work, we use Jupyter Notebooks and Python to do our coding. And of course, like as I said earlier, all of this work, our development process requires a little bit of dev, because you do need to share your work in a repository so that others can use it. That's kind of the way, that's kind of a principle on which we operate and manage changes. So folks are coming to my team at all stages and abilities with that. I expose them to the tooling based on where they can add value in the moment. So it's if there's a tool like Tableau where I know it's so complex that you can't just sit down and start, like, we will pursue formal training. So we would, figure out how many licenses or with our license structure, how much training and development can we provide to our people. But if it's something like that, they're going to get advice to sit for a training like that. When it's a tool like Looker that's kind of more approachable on the front end, I might, sit and help them through working in that tool. And we do some internal training as well. When it comes to like helping somebody make the shift into R and Python, I do personally recommend kind of stepping away from work and learning through a class or a boot camp where you're kind of making sure that you understand the foundations of what's going on. Or like in R, I learned through the Swirl library how to, just program and get answers out of R. And I think doing exercises like that at work and through your work, through the educational resources that are provided by your HR team, if you're lucky enough to have those, like, go take that class, go take that boot camp, and really understand what's going on that's appropriate for your role. We want to help people understand, okay, this is what your role is. And so with that, these are the kind of tasks that a data scientist will do. And so you need to learn how to do this much in Python or R. Whereas, you know, if you want to learn how to pipeline data, I'm going to send you over to my colleagues, right? Because I'm not really good at that, and I'm pretty open about that. So, but yeah, I always recommend further education. But I am open and honest with my team, because I think, you know, when you're busy and you've got a lot of work to do, sometimes that's really difficult to hear as an individual contributor, like, oh, I'm asking you to do more. We also try to provide education in fun ways at Peloton. Like, we have one of my colleagues, Will, he had this idea to do a data labs concept where anybody on the team can come up with this idea, like, oh, I wish somebody was working on this at Peloton. And I'm being honest with you, it could be a PM. And if they just want to try their hand at solving a data science problem, we create a space for that, where we kind of nurture the problem, help them work through it with the resources we have, and coach them up, so they could get their feet wet and get some exposure and get excited about data science, even if it's not their main job.
That sounds great. I love the data labs idea. I see. Thank you, Libby, for being an extra set of eyes for me. But David, you had your hand raised earlier for a question. You want to jump in? And I see, oh, there you are. No worries.
Right button. Thanks. I'm a first timer here.
Welcome.
Technology
Glad to have
veteran, kind of, you know, in that chronically underemployed set. But I enjoy working so much that these things are really exciting to me. I volunteered in the chat. Essentially what I wanted to say was, you know, the work-life sustainability is really important. And sometimes new managers don't see it coming that somebody's going to be leaving the team, and you end up with a gap in the team and everybody has to pull up the slack. One of the best ways to get your team's trust and your organization's trust is to make sure that you have the capacity to get things done. So, you know, you always under promise and over deliver. And you gotta have people around you in order to do that as a manager. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Wow, very timely for me. And yes to all that you said. Thank you.
I think I see you had a question. You had a question in there too, David. Maybe in the one in the chat. Do you want to ask that too?
I'm not sure I asked a question.
Okay, I think it was somebody asked, "Who are you grooming?" Okay, let's.
Yeah,
see.
those are questions for the manager.
Okay, who are you grooming to join, and how are you paving the way? Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, the manager's focus moves from doing the work to creating the environment for the work to get done.
Definitely. I see. Let me go check over to Slido. Tyler, are there any questions that we maybe missed on Slido? Oh, Javier, I see you have your hand raised. Jump in.
Yeah, thanks. And Melissa, I really like your insights. Thanks for sharing everything. So I'm just curious about, you know, in my experience, I feel like some of the best data scientists that I've worked with that have left the companies have just gotten bored. So, you know, things in our space are moving so fast as is. How do you continue to give, you know, motivated employees who want to continue to learn, you know, the opportunities for learning? Because once they start plateauing or feel like they're not really learning anything new, despite them being more of an add value to their current employer, you know, they themselves start looking elsewhere. So I don't know, sort of an open-ended question.
Yeah. One of the very first things I do with my team, and I apologize, I forgot to mention this when I started talking about how do I develop people, because we were talking like more technical earlier, but one of the very first conversations I have with my people is like, where are you going after you leave me? Because inevitably, like, we're not going to work together always, right? But my job, like, because I'm so people oriented, is like, how do I make sure that this experience and this relationship is beneficial for the both of us? And I think that's the conversation where you start to figure out what's motivating people. Like, when I came to Peloton, I shared with my leader, like, I really want to work on figuring out how to get use cases into production. I've been struggling with that for years. Like, that was something that I said. But I've got people on my team that are like, you know what? I want to be a data scientist. So I'm like, okay, well, let me go figure out how to get out there and find them work. And so through my relationships and helping them empathize with people, and figure out what their problems are, we find use cases. And I am like kind of out there talking about their work, how they've done such a great job on this dashboard thing. But, you know, really what I'm hearing is that you're really trying to make this decision. And so, like, let's just use extended warranty as an example. My team was delivering great reporting on sales and claims for our third-party warranty provider. But, you know, I had a data scientist sitting on the sideline that said, you know, what if we could predict who was best positioned to buy an extended warranty? And I said, go for it. Don't just sit there, go for it. And so I kind of have them work on that in the background. And then I go and do the politicking to go, hey, James, I've got something for you. We're doing all this on the side that you've asked for, but you know what? I had a person that was really curious, and they were curious about delivering this kind of value. Why don't you check it out? And because we've done so much on the front end to answer that first question and deliver value of what they actually asked, they'll receive it. And then that use case continues to grow. And then it gets into prod if we're lucky. And that use case actually got turned into a feature that is used for marketing. So one way or the other, that's where it comes from. And then that person grows, and then their mind grows, their eyes open, and then here they continue. Now they're a data scientist.
That's amazing. I love to hear about the way that you're advocating for all the people on your team internally to get there. I see, Michelle, you had a great question in the chat. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just curious about how your data org broadly kind of draws the line between data engineering, data science, and data analysts. And then for a particular use case that requires more data modeling and pipelines from, let's say, like a raw data source that the company hasn't touched yet, how do you collaborate with data engineers to deliver that value to the stakeholders?
Yeah, this is great. And my teammates who are on the call are probably smiling because we work together. We work together with that Center of Excellence team. We sit right next to the data engineering team. That's one of the reasons I wanted to come to Peloton, because our Center of Excellence team has that like 15, 16 person data engineering squad. And they are filled with data engineers who are doing everything from getting data out of like pulling events off of our Kafka streaming and bringing it into the lake. And then you have folks that are doing your traditional ETL modeling as well as ELT modeling. They have analytics engineers as well, who are more so like alongside the data analysts in this space, like the data analysts being the first folks at the front lines who are listening and talking to the business. So, I mean, the way that if you think of it in a cycle, you have your stakeholder up first, and then your data analyst like has that really close relationship with someone on that stakeholder team. And they're saying, okay, well, these are like the requirements and this is the problem I'm trying to solve. And then like, let's say you need a new pipeline. Well, that is probably going to be built like in its first pass by an analytics engineer from our data science or from our data engineering side of the house. And we get something like MVP going. And then after that, like we start thinking about okay, do we need to evolve this model? Is there something that needs to be improved on the engineering side of the house to make this more efficient? And so our services team might get involved. Beyond that, then you're thinking about, okay, here we've delivered this. You've got your dashboard, you're seeing it. What's next for you? What decision are we making here? And that's when our data scientists come in and they begin to start modeling that decision and outputting the results. And we would work with, once we're sitting on those results, we would visualize them, assess the quality. And beyond that, you're figuring out where to pipe that service. I mean, where do you take that answer and serve it up? Because, you know, the results of that decision might not be best in a dashboard, especially if you're delivering it to somebody in a warehouse. Maybe we need to pipe it into that warehouse tool. So we have another set. Some of our data engineers are like more generalized. They can do it all. Like, they're amazing. And so they would write services for us. I hope that helped. That's how our shop runs. We also collaborate with other people across Peloton, though. You know, there's folks in IT who are configuring IT systems that people are touching. And sometimes it's just a matter of like landing data in Redshift and getting it picked up from another team. It really depends. Really depends, Michelle, but that's a fabulous question.
Thank you. I see. Well, I actually had one quick question too. I know you mentioned the Center of Excellence a few times, and I was just curious to learn more about like what that Center of Excellence is, and if that's a model that you recommend for other teams too.
Yeah, you know what? I'm sure other leaders on the call are smiling because I think, you know, I've worked in an embedded role before and loved it. Center of Excellence, let me just define what I mean by that. I mean that there's a team of folks in what we call the data science team or the data and analytics team, and they serve the business in this like central function. They're providing frameworks, the tech stack, places to document things, process, structure, training on the tech stack, like expertise. And then beyond that, you've got other analytics teams that are throughout the company that are also trying to help their leaders make decisions, but probably more rapidly, more rapid fire. They would utilize the expertise and the tech stack from the central team to help their leaders. And usually their leaders want things yesterday. And, you know, that central team doesn't necessarily have the capacity to like intake and work all that, but they do have the capacity to keep things clean and organized. And so that's really what I mean by that. How's that working at Peloton? Well, we're continuing to evolve our story there. I think, you know, we're in a space now where we've got a little bit of a patchwork going on. We're you know, growing out of a startup phase, and that's natural. And so hone it all in and then send it all back out with our new leadership. So, and what I mean by honing it all in is like getting everybody realigned, building those relationships, standardizing some of those relationships with the teams that are depending on that Center of Excellence. So it's a lot of work, but good work, important for a company of our size to get alignment. That way your leaders don't have multiple versions of the truth.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I think Libby, you put a question into the chat just a few minutes ago. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, my question was, what made you want to make that initial shift from individual contributor to people leader in the first place? And did you have any concerns or reservations going into that leadership journey where you were like, okay, let's try this. I'm worried about these things. What did that look like for you?
Yeah. Very, very good question. I realized very quickly when I was like a business analyst working in education that I like people. Like I like seeing other people do good work, improve their work using data, like get more strategic, be more successful. I like using data in that way. But I recognized very quickly that as an IC, I wasn't necessarily the one that was achieving that. I saw my leaders doing that. Like I saw them rubbing elbows and doing the politics to like get the data in use. And so I'm like, okay, I want to learn how to do that, because I got to this point of frustration where it's like, how many dashboards can I build before, you know, my brain just explodes and nobody listens? And what are they even doing with this data? And why would they do that? And how does this company even make money? You know, what's the strategy here? And I just found, you know, my background's in economics. I just cared more about that. I just cared more about that social element of it and helping the work become a success, making value out of the work, than I did actually touching the keyboard. Now, don't get me wrong. Every once in a while, I'll pick up a ticket and just vibe. Like it's a flow, you know, when you're doing something. I still feel that way sometimes when I do some work. So I'm still a nerd. I still like to talk about how to model things and what data goes in, but I wanted to do it from a different angle. And as I also like to help my stakeholders do better, I really like to grow people's careers. That's like nirvana for me. Once I can see somebody, that analyst, grow from a data scientist, that was like a crowning moment. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is right. Now, like I said, I had people tell me no when I first stepped out as a leader. I don't know if you've ever heard she's not technical enough. That was funny. Had to work through that. Still a trigger point for me, because, you know, here I am, I'm social. I like to help people. And then, so it you know, called into question my technical ability. Well, that wasn't very good for the ego or the confidence. But I've worked past that. In a weak point, sometimes I'll go there and have that imposter syndrome. But it's my people and my stakeholders that build me back up. I get that feedback. No, this is really helpful. So yeah, I would say that was the biggest hurdle that I faced. Now, and I did pursue more education, because I did realize that my skills had atrophied at like that business analyst layer, and I couldn't progress. I couldn't go further into the analytics engineering or the data science and truly be able to produce or understand what those people do. So I did pursue more education to address that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's so incredibly helpful, Melissa.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about like wanting to actually change the strategy there and figure out how to make the business better, getting to that point. I remember when we were talking briefly before the Hangout, something we were going to discuss, which I know we didn't talk about yet, was what's the biggest need that you have to address in Peloton's data science community?
Yeah, I think right now it's establishing one source of truth and gaining alignment. Like when we were talking earlier about the center of excellence, it's like refining and truly being a thought leader for what does that mean for how we behave, how we treat one another, how we communicate and talk to each other about data. What does it mean for evolving thought leadership around concepts like data governance? You know, at a fast moving company like Peloton, you say data governance, like people are, what do you mean? Like, you're about to slow me down. You're about to say this and this. And I'm like, no, like we can't. Like, you have to give these folks over here a shot. You have to listen. And I'm listening and I'm going to adopt this and I want you to too. So like, I think it's figuring out how to show up in the center of excellence space and bring along all my colleagues. I've got like 30 stakeholder teams, and like figuring out how to have them show up in the space and truly work together like a Peloton, you know. I'm sure I'm not the only person who, like, you know, your company culture says one thing and then you get into the data space and it's like a completely different thing. But we can probably all laugh on the inside about that.
Thank you so much. I think we did a pretty good job of capturing everything. Thank you so much, Melissa, for joining us. It's been so fun and really love getting to hear your insights and your experience. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was such a joy, and I can't wait to see the folks that present in the coming weeks. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you. And next week we will be joined by Jesse Pluto, who works at Comcast. Can't remember her title right off the top of my head right now, but really excited to see you all next week as well. Thank you so much, Melissa, and thank you all for all the great questions as always. Have a great rest of the day.